You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. Good Monday morning. Let's jump right into this episode. Okay, so some news came out on Sunday right before the San Antonio Spurs prepare to play their first preseason game on Monday against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Unfortunately, this is like a balloon that was getting blown up, and then all of a sudden they got deflated because the Spurs announced that multiple players will be out for this first preseason game against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Monday. Up to 6 players are going to be out. Some players we kind of expected would be out, but then 2 players who really a lot of people might be eager to see out on the floor are Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama. They're both going to be out as well for this game. So let's go and kind of go through this news, and then I want to go through some other interviews that some of the players went through and Coach Pop as well over the past weekend that I didn't get to get on the last episode of the Spot Up Pod. So who are the 6 players that are out? Wemby, as I mentioned earlier, Wemby is out. Chris Paul is out as well. So is Devin Vassell, Zach Collins, Charles Bassey, and David Duke Jr. So Pop basically said on Saturday in an interview that basically he didn't know who was going to be out on Monday, what the starting lineup would be, because he says that, the players had a very intense, tough practice. And so we do see that two players, expected to be in that 2-man rotation, Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul, will both be out, according to Pop. So again, we would just chalk this up to rest for those 2 players. Devin Vassell, it is not a surprise that he's out for this game because the Spurs did announce that he wouldn't be reevaluated until November 1st. So again, Devin's expected to miss all of training camp at the preseason, plus he's expected to miss the first 5 games of the regular season. So that's not too much of a shocker that Devin's out. And then Zach Collins and Charles Bassey, Pop says that they've been going, 5-on-5 against some of the other players on the team and their workouts this past week. But the team, when they initially, announced the injury situations for Collins and Bassey, they had said that both players were expected to be back on opening night, October 24th. So again, I don't know if they're going to get into one of these other 4 preseason games after this OKC one, but for sure, Bassey and Collins are out for this opening preseason game against the Thunder. And then finally, David Duke Jr. is also out. The Spurs didn't really disclose what his injury situation is, but if we go back to Summer League, he was on the Spurs' Summer League team and he never actually played in a game. He had some sort of injury as well that he's kind of dealing with. So David Duke Jr. is out as well. And again, he's probably not going to be part of the 10-man rotation. He's there on a 2-way contract. So again, Duke's out as well. So those are the 6 players that are out. So with those 6 players out, the next question is, who are the 15 players that are available at least for this game against the Thunder? So we do know that at the guard, I'm just going to go through the positions that the Spurs have players available. So at the guard position, there's Trey Jones, there's Stephon Castle, Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, and Malachi Flynn, who is on a training camp contract. So again, 5 different guards are available for this game. Then when we look at forwards, this is where the majority of the team, their roster is located with forwards. It's Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, Keldon Johnson, Julian Champagnie, Brandon Boston Jr., Riley Minix, Sandro Mamukelashvili, and Harrison Ingram, plus CD Sissoko. So that's 9 different players who can kind of play that forward position, whether it's like a 3 or a 4. Those are 9 different players. So again, 9 forwards, 5 guards. And then there's only one with Collins, Wemby, and Bassey, all 3 of them out. There's only one actual traditional center, you would say, on this roster healthy right now. And that's Nathan Mensah for this game, at least. So Nathan Mensah is the only big out there. So regarding, who's going to start, obviously we'll see what happens on Monday, who Pop puts into the starting lineup. I do expect Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Sohan to probably start because, when we look at the, maybe what an idea of the Spurs starting lineup might look like, Barnes and Sohan might have been 2 players who are going to be in the starting lineup whenever the team's fully healthy and ready to go. So again, I do think that those 2 players will be in the starting lineup. We'll kind of see who Pop puts around them, whether he just wants to put the next best available player or if he wants to kind of keep the rotation similar, where maybe someone that he has for a bench role, that player stays in this bench role even in this game against the Thunder in that preseason game. When does this game? What are the details regarding this game? So this game is expected on Monday. The tip-off time is 7 p.m. Central Time. If you're watching on TV as a San Antonio viewer, the game's on CWSA and also NBA TV for the national audience. This game will be broadcast. I haven't seen which players are going to be in or out for the Thunder, but I am hoping that we get to at least see Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein there for OKC, 2 of the new additions that the Thunder made in this past off season. So that is the first topic regarding just the 6 players out for this first preseason game for the Spurs. For our second topic, I want to go through some comments that Coach Pop made, and then also go through Pop's comments as well as Keldon Johnson and a few other players' comments from over the weekend, from Friday and Saturday. So Pop, when he was asked about the starting five, if he kind of has an idea of who's going to be the starting five, he basically said he still didn't know as of going into Monday, who the starting five will be. Obviously, he's been on the record since media day of saying that Victor Wembanyama was going to start. That's pretty much expected. He also mentioned that even though Devin Vassell is going to be out to begin to start the season, he said that, whenever Vassell does eventually get healthy, that Vassell will have his starting job back. So we know for sure two starters are going to be Wemby and Vassell whenever the team's fully healthy. And then again, like I've mentioned before on this podcast, that I think Chris Paul would be the starting point guard. I think Harrison Barnes is going to start as well, Jeremy Sohan as well, to fill out the starting five. And then, of course, it just becomes that question of, who's going to fill in for Vassell while he's out for those first few weeks of the season. So now what I want to do is I want to go through some comments that not only Pop, but other players have been mentioning about Stephon Castle. So the rookie who was selected with the 4th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, he's been getting a lot of praise from different players and also Coach Pop here, just regarding, first of all, like just kind of the demeanor that he has. He has a very calming presence. He plays at his own pace. And then the fact that he's ready to go defensively, that's one of his hallmarks that he's bringing in. One of his abilities is his defensive perimeter defense out there. And so here's some quotes that I want to read regarding Castle. First, let's go with Pop. Here's what he said. He's impressive, really mature young man. He has a great demeanor and way about him. Goes to the next play. He has a good basketball IQ, strong. He learns quickly. He's a good one. When asked if, Castle will play a little bit on or off the ball this season, here's what Pop said. And this is, again, very interesting because it shows his versatility, Castle. He can play 1, 2, or 3 right now. So again, that's Pop saying that Castle's ready, whether he needs to be, in the starting lineup as a 2, whether he needs to come off the bench as a 3 or a backup point guard. Castle's ready to fill a bunch of different roles here. And so that's a good sign that Castle's going to get some minutes somewhere. Even though he's just a rookie, he's going to find the team will find some minutes for him and a role for him where he can kind of move around in different lineups. So again, that was interesting to hear from Coach Pop. The next player who I want to read his quote on Castle was Chris Paul. So Chris Paul on Friday, he had one of his interviews, and he spoke about Castle. So I'm going to read what he said. He said, "Man, Steph is so good. You can always tell some players when they come into the league how they were coached in college. I'm thankful for my late coach, Skip Prosser, because the way I was coached in college prepared me for the NBA, and you can tell Steph is well coached, but the confidence level that he has is so good to see too. You only get that type of confidence from putting in the work, and that's what he does." So again, that was Chris Paul being very talking about Stephon Castle's game as well. And then finally, here is Harrison Barnes. So here's what Barnes had to say about Steph. He said, "Steph's been great. I think his ability to defend at a high level really impressed me. He's young, but he's got a mature body to go out there, and he can pretty much switch 1 through 4. And he wants to be great. He wants to be good. So I've liked his ability defensively to pick up the concepts quickly and kind of go out there and make an impact." So again, that was 2 different veteran players plus Coach Pop discussing Stephon Castle. And like I mentioned, I've also read other players in training camp kind of talking about Castle. So again, that's a lot of praise that the rookie's been getting Castle. And we see that obviously he's bringing it on the defensive end. That's one thing he himself said, is that he really wanted to impress his teammates and other players in the league by really just being known for his reputation as a defender first. And then of course we're seeing, that his creativity on the offensive end and how his versatility works, where he can play at different positions. He's talked about how he's looking forward to play with Victor out on the floor in different kind of lineups as well. So again, that's just some praise from Coach Pop and some other players about Stephon Castle. Pop was also asked about the role for Keldon Johnson this season, and he basically said that, he said that the team really hasn't decided that his role just yet. So if we go back to Keldon, where it's kind of a question mark of where his role is going to be. He's going to get minutes. He's one of the Spurs' young players here, who's been part of the team for a number of years. So he's going to play, whether he's a starter or off the bench. He's going to get some minutes somewhere. And just because that question was asked, because if we go back to Keldon's situation last year he did begin, as a starter. They're kind of like the wing position. Then later on in the season, when the Spurs made that switch of going with Wemby to the starting 5 and bringing Zach Collins off the bench, later on down the season, Keldon actually went to a bench role as well there to be more so like a spark off the bench, but also to give Wemby and Devin Vassell, 2 of the Spurs' go-to players on offense, their opportunity to create for themselves and others. So again, we don't quite know what kind of role Keldon has yet, and even Pops is saying here that he doesn't know quite yet what kind of role he has. But just going into this preseason, I did expect that eventually Keldon would probably still have a very similar role off the bench, where he's kind of one of the leading scorers off the bench. And so unless things have changed, I do expect that to probably be his role this coming season. Keldon on Saturday also spoke with the media, and he had some some comments on what he's kind of worked on when he was asked about, what did you work on individually over the offseason? So I want to read his full quote here. He said, "This offseason, I feel like I watched a lot of film to improve my game. Obviously, you stay in the gym. I stay in the gym working on my skills, working on shooting, ball handling, things like that to make sure I kept tight. But just improving my mental aspect of the game, moving without the ball, being in the right spots on defense, it's things like that is areas that I focused most on this off season." So again, there's Keldon kind of talking about different areas that he's kind of worked on. So that was a pretty good answer to hear here. He was a little bit more in depth there. He also has mentioned multiple times that, he's definitely got in better shape this off season. Really watching, what he's eating and things like that. And that has given him the ability to try to play some of the best defensive, coming into a season. So again, that's really one of his areas that he's very focused on, is the defensive end of the floor that he has said. And then something else Keldon said was that he basically said that, training camp feels a little bit different this year just because the team has, for one, like the players that are returning, there's a lot of players back. They have a lot more continuity, after getting to go through a season together, they've built that continuity and that chemistry, but also because they've added some veterans like Chris Paul, like Harrison Barnes to the team. So that was just something that Keldon mentioned. And then finally, looking at some other comments from Harrison Barnes, he and CP3 had this comment about how, in practice the other day when they were scrimmaging, they actually saw Wemby take one of those 1-foot threes. And so that's just something that Barnes just is not, usually prepared for.
Can you take us back to that one-legged three? What are you thinking when you see that?
I mean, I thought I was in good position. They were in a break, and I forgot who had the ball. They kind of threw it back, and I was at the elbow, and I was going towards. And, it's a couple feet behind three-point line. I'm thinking, okay, I'll just close out normal, and the second foot didn't come down. And at that point, you just kind of tip your hat. It's just that.
Have you tried that at any point in your career?
I can't say I have. I can't, but it's not also the first time I've seen him do that.
Yeah.
He hasn't missed it yet. So I don't know if he's practiced it or he just feels comfortable doing it.
He's just for the other Spurs players like Keldon, he kind of mentioned this, how they're kind of just used to what Wemby does at this point. They're just it's for them, it's like the norm. For Victor, it's just like the normal thing the way he plays sometimes. But for new players to the team, such as CP3, such as Harrison Barnes, this is a whole new element for them. They're just like, whoa, this guy can do this. 7'5". So that was some interesting comments to hear from Harrison Barnes when he was guarding Wemby, and Wemby ended up taking a very casual 1-footed 3-point shot there in practice. Something else Harrison Barnes did is that he gave a shout out to Malachi Branham. So if we go back to media day, he basically said that Blake Wesley's defense would really stuck out to him in those open scrimmages in the summertime. But now that they've got into training camp, he says that Malachi Branham is a player who is shooting the ball very well. And so again, like we mentioned multiple times here on the Spotted Pod, this is a very big October for both Wesley and Branham because they had their team options that needed to be decided on by October 31st by the team. And so again, Branham has a really good chance here against Monday against the Thunder to get some real minutes, and we'll see if that really follows through with how much he says that he's worked on his game, and also what some of the players are saying about him. And then finally, Sohan did mention how Barnes did mention how Jeremy Sohan can now concentrate on his natural role, probably at that power forward role, because he doesn't have to be the lead ball handler anymore, like the Spurs made him do last season when the season began. Because the Spurs have CP3 on the roster, they have Trey Jones as a ball handler, and then an interesting comment that Barnes made was that he also said Wemby's a ball handler, even though we think of Victor as this big 7'5" a player who kind of dunks on everyone, can shoot some threes. If we go back and watch some tape on Wemby, there's times when basically Trey Jones is setting a pick for him and he's running a fun pick and roll. So Wemby can also put the ball on the floor, drive. And so I think that's one thing we need to kind of note is that yes, CP3 is probably going to bring the ball up the floor, or Trey Jones when they're out there. But there's times that when you get in the half court offense, you kick the ball to Victor, he might start at the 3-point line and either try to take his player one-on-one or use a pick and roll, use a DHO. So I think that just shows you Wemby's unique ability of also being known as a ball handler as well, because that's something that one, he's worked on, coming into the league, but also he also put some extra effort into that when he worked out with Jamal Crawford over the summer. And then lastly, one of the comments that Barnes made was that he says that he's looking forward to teaming up with Chris Paul. He just kind of went back to their rivalries over the years, how playing against Paul has always been a tough obstacle, that a lot of times when the teams that Barnes was on, the fact that they lost late in games against in the final 5 minutes is because Paul was usually out there, being the player that was really, thinking through and figure out, how to best hold that lead for his team. And so that was something interesting that Barnes mentioned, that he's just really looking forward to playing with CP3 for the first time in his career. So again, that kind of wraps up this episode. I just want to do go through some quick notes on what's been going on with the team, especially the fact that they're going to be missing multiple players for this opening preseason game. But we'll have a new episode right after the Spurs Thunder game the next day, just to kind of recap what happened in that game. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spot Up Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spot Up Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening and have a great day.